Hi class, this video clip is the last part of our conceptual study, which is the logical of argument. In the humanities, we use Toomey model, which is from Stephen Toomey, a British philosopher. Stephen Toomey was born in 1922 and he passed away in 2009. In 1958, he published this book, The Uses of Argument, in which, for the first time, he proposed Toomey model. I know to you guys, 1958 sounds really old, but compared with the other logical model, syllogism, Toomey model is actually very, very young. Um, Syllogism was discussed by Aristotle, and Aristotle was born in 384 BC. So Toomey model really is a contemporary model. You have done the reading on Toomey model, and you have picked your concepts of this model. And now I'm review my understanding of Toomey model, which starts from the basic terms. First is argument. An argument is a debatable or controversial statement or assertion. Note that for a lot of instructors in their writing courses, they use either claim or thesis to refer to an argument, and which is perfectly fine. In my case, I always use argument because I want to imply that I'm using Toomey model. Next concept is evidence. Evidence is the valid data or facts that support an argument. And the next is a warrant. An warrant is the assumption that leads evidence to an argument. From actually Toomey's writing, I think this point is really important. Toomey also states that warrants are the belief or value systems of a society. He also states that the weakest part of any argument is its weakest warrant. I know all these terms at this point sound abstract, but let's look at the real cases. I want to give you an example of women's suffrage movement. The argument, or actually the practice, was women should not be allowed to vote. The evidence was women dependent on men. That was true because before 1900, basically women, before they married, they dependent on their fathers. Usually fathers support the family by doing jobs, and women as the mothers, they stayed home to bring up the kids and also, to do the chores. And it was men who earn income for the family. Therefore, women were considered dependent on men. And the warrant was women were inferior to men. That's why, jobs were open to men, not women. It was actually the first wave of feminist movement when people started questioning this very warrant. And the opposite of this warrant was men and women should be equal. And then once people, started thinking this way, and then they questioned why women, you know, um, were not allowed to work. So they, especially women, of course, a lot of men too, um, asked to open jobs to women, and gradually, women were able to find jobs in all kinds of fields. And then once they have jobs, then financially, they became independent, and it was possible actually that women were dependent. And once women uh, became independent, of course they would ask the right to vote, and it was actually established that women should be allowed to vote, and women have the right to vote. And it's exactly this 19th Amendment. The right of citizens of the United States to vote should not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. And after that, of course, we have civil rights movement, and recently the LGBTQ movement. All those movements actually started from questioning the very warrants of the arguments that we have in our society. And by doing so, actually, our society um, progressed. So that's the example of the weakest part of any argument is its weakest warrant. Next term is a qualifier. Qualifiers are words and phrases that place limits on an argument. And note that in this class, I use specificity because by using qualifier, it could be misleading in a sense. We can understand qualifiers as adjectives, put limitations on words, but actually not only that, in writing, I want you to be aware that, when you choose word, you actually pay attention to the specificity of the words and your writing. So I'm using specificity in this class instead of qualifier. Next is everyone's favorite, rebuttal. And rebuttal has another name, counterargument, which includes potential objections and exceptions to the argument. The first two criteria of academic arguments are: first, we argue what is arguable. In other words, if we established, facts, then we don't argue about facts anymore. For instance, we don't argue anymore that women are inferior to men. We don't argue anymore that the earth is flat. We don't argue anymore that the sun is the center of the universe, because we have established that those are not facts. Second, we argue what is worth arguing. I think there's certain kind of negative connotation attached to the word argument, in the sense that we don't like argue a lot, especially in our, life. And an argumentative person usually is not a popular person. In academia, basically, we argue with what is worth arguing, meaning we don't argue trivial stuff like, who is doing today's dish. Instead, we argue those things that has meanings to our society, those biases that really affect people's life. So we, do research, we find evidence, we argue for change, basically. Here is the simplest model of argument. And basically, we collect data and we choose from data part of them as our evidence, and we use evidence to support our argument. And our arguments always come with specificity. The structure, however, is the other way you can see that, because in Western tradition, an argumentative essay basically is structured this way. You state your argument first, then you elaborate on the argument by using evidence. And at the end of paper, you have your reference list or works cited list to show your data. And then you have warrant to make sure this process is sound. A lot of scholars actually don't elaborate on their warrants. That's why I think Toomey model is extremely brilliant, because if you don't elaborate on that, people just think they're right, and or they don't even read about it, so they don't think about it. However, like we discussed before, warrants quite be very, very, very problematic, and we should pay a lot of attention to warrants. Now, this is a set of argument. Plato is mortal, and then it's the argument. Evidence, Plato is human, and the warrant, humans are mortal. Mortal means, anything with limited lifespan. This is kind of very classical, typical set of an argument, also simplest one. However, if you read in other places, it's not Plato, it's Socrates. But I think we know Plato better, so I use Plato. And then look, we have two sets of arguments here. They're exactly the same if you read them. And the only difference is here, Plato and Al Gore. You guys know Al Gore, right? He is our former vice president under Bill Clinton's administration. Do you think these two sets are the same? Okay, Plato is dead. Therefore, Plato is mortal is a fact. However, Al Gore is still alive, and Al Gore is mortal is an argument. I think this is the beauty of logic, that it allows us to deduce a reasonable argument. Another set of arguments, the difference is the position of human and mortal. You know this set, right? Plato is mortal because Plato is human. Humans are mortal. Look at this one. Plato is human because Plato is mortal. Humans are mortal. Is this set sound? Okay, think this way. What if you have a dog and his name is Plato? And then this argument doesn't work, right? Plato is mortal, works for a dog, but Plato is not human. What's going on here actually is humans are mortal. This statement itself is sound, but it's not the warrant for this evidence to this argument. Mortals are human. This is a warrant for this argument. However, mortals are human. This statement is wrong. It's not sound because mortals are human, are birds, are cats and dogs, are all things, like I said, with a limited lifespan. They are mortals. So even though it is right warrant for this argument, but this statement itself is not right. Therefore, this argument is wrong. Okay, look at this. Now we have example to fill in this structure. Argument, Plato is mortal, and evidence, Plato is human. How do we know? We have historical data like Plato's books and memoirs about Plato, writings about Plato. So it's definitely true that Plato is human. And the specificity in this argument is about Plato the philosopher, not Plato your dog, and Plato's mortality. The warrant is humans are mortal. And then actually the elaboration on a warrant we name it backing, right? The backing is not a single human has lived more than 123 years. So that's the whole argument they said. And then in academic arguments, we have two more criteria. The third one, we argue what is specific. Fourth one, we argue what is complex. Okay, this is really important in academic. There was once a student asked me like, how can I write a paper on Plato is human? It's just so simple. Then I said, well, actually in academic, it's more complicated than that. That is, I mean, that set of argument is for demonstration. In academic, actually, these two are really important. So the four criteria for an argument and an academic argument or good argument is here. If a statement can pass the first two, if the statement is arguable and is worth arguing, then it is an argument. And then another two criteria, if a statement or an argument is specific and is complex, then it's a good argument or an academic argument. I'll show you what I mean. Here is just about definition. So specificity is to restrict the claim, allowing you to avoid unfair and inaccurate statements in your essays. Okay, so this is related to our writing. Specificity usually is the points, sub-arguments that you need to elaborate, meaning an argument has to be broken down into sub-arguments, and a sub-argument in turn is to be broken down into points. Then that's actually the specificity. And complexity means that structurally an argument is synthesized out of multiple sub-arguments and each sub-argument by multiple points if necessary. So specificity is more about the meaning, and complexity is more about the structure of an argument. I'll show you how. So this is one kind of structure of argument. You have a main argument, and then you break this argument down into sub-arguments. Each sub-argument, you have evidence to support it, and you have the warrant to make sure this whole process are valid. Okay, and then it's even usually, okay, actually even usually published articles in academia, they actually have this structure. However, even more complicated structures here. You have argument, and then it can be broken down into sub-arguments. Each sub-argument further can be broken down into points, and each point supported by evidence, usually actually multiple pieces of evidence, and you have data here. This structure usually is a structure of a book. The example, if you have read this book, is Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. And it has an argument, global warming caused by excessive amount of greenhouse gases from human activities has detrimental consequences, and we should act now to stop it. So this is argument, and then it can be broken down into sub-arguments 1, 2, 3, 4. First one, the unusual increases of temperature is caused by the increased amount of greenhouse gases, especially carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And second, global warming has detrimental consequences. And third one, human activities contribute to the massive amount of carbon dioxide emission. And the last one, we still can and should stop global warming. And each one you have points there and to elaborate. So this is a structure of a book. And then the article, the core text of our class, its structure actually is more like this one. subargument 1, 2, 3, and evidence. And you are gonna get the structure of that article later, okay, according to this demonstration here. And another example of an academic argument is the picture of egg and sperm drawn in popular as well as scientific accounts of reproductive biology relies on stereotypes central to our cultural definitions of male and female. The stereotypes imply not only that female biological processes are less worthy than their male counterparts, but also that women are less worthy than men. Okay, so this is actually a classical essay about the representation of male and female reproductive systems in biological textbooks, and the author made this argument. Can you speculate the sub-arguments as an exercise? Okay, think about that. So this is the end of our discussion on the logical model of argument. And bye-bye.